Imagine a man who spent his life fighting to keep his country together, and on the night that country might finally split in two, he's not in Parliament, not on a stage, not at a microphone. He's in a dim living room, a blanket over his knees, watching his greatest rival on television, while a tumor grows silently inside, his skull like a ticking bomb. Robert Bourassa, the master strategist, the cool technocrat, now has less time on the clock than the country he tried to hold together. The TV lights flicker across his face. On the screen, Jacques Parizeau smiles, confident, almost serene, as he campaigns for a yes vote in the 1995 referendum on Quebec sovereignty. This is the showdown Bourassa always knew was coming, but not like this. For 25 years, he and the sovereigntists have been racing toward this moment. Now the finish line is in sight, and Bourassa no longer holds any official power. His rival is Premier. The polls are tightening. The date is fixed. And his doctors have quietly warned him his own body is running out of time. To understand how cruelly the clock is stacked against him, you have to wind it back just a little. In 1990, while still Premier, Bourassa walks into a doctor's office thinking he's going to get a routine answer. Instead, he hears a word that cuts through his careful composure: melanoma. Skin cancer. They find a lesion, small, almost trivial looking on the surface. They remove it. He returns to his desk, to meetings, to negotiations. From the outside, nothing changes. Inside, he knows the countdown has started. At the same time, his great constitutional gambit, the Meech Lake Accord, collapses in front of the entire country. After years of bargaining to see Quebec recognized as a distinct society within Canada, the accord dies in a storm of last-minute objections and running clocks in provincial legislatures. Television cameras show the seconds ticking away as the deadline passes. Bourassa watches as the chance to reconcile Quebec with the 1982 Constitution evaporates, not with a bang, but with the dull thud of procedural failure. The country's clock hits zero. His own is still ticking. The political fallout is brutal. Nationalists accuse him of weakness, of trusting English Canada too much. Federalists are angry that he pushed so far. In the streets of Montreal, the day after Meech dies, thousands of people chant slogans, wave Quebec flags, and shout their anger at a system they feel has humiliated them. In that crowd, a young politician named Lucien Bouchard, once Bourassa's ally, now transformed into a sovereigntist hero, becomes the face of a movement Bourassa has been fighting his entire career. Even his former friends are choosing sides against him. Yet Bourassa refuses to be finished. He turns to another deal, the Charlottetown Accord, trying one more time to rewrite the constitutional rules before the political clock runs out. He negotiates with prime ministers, premiers, Indigenous leaders, business groups. It's a vast, intricate puzzle, exactly the kind of technical challenge he normally relishes. But the country is exhausted. When Charlottetown goes to a national referendum in 1992, Canadians vote no. Quebecers, too, reject the deal in large numbers. For the second time in 2 years, Bourassa watches his grand compromise fall apart. Then comes the twist he cannot control at all. The cancer is back. In 1993, doctors find that the melanoma has spread to his brain. The enemy now is not just political, it is microscopic, invisible, inside his own head. He undergoes operations, treatments. For a man whose power has always come from his ability to calculate, to analyze, to read a room faster than anyone else, the idea that his brain is under attack is more than medical news. It feels like fate mocking him. He is still premier, still the leader of the Quebec Liberal Party, but he understands something his public does not fully know. His personal clock is no longer aligned with the political calendar. Elections can be postponed, votes delayed, negotiations reopened. Cancer does not negotiate. He starts to plan his exit with the same cold precision he once used to plan hydroelectric megaprojects. In 1993, he tells his entourage he will not seek another term. In January 1994, he confirms it publicly. He will step down before the next election. The man who once seemed to emerge from every crisis still standing now sets his own deadline. For his rival Jacques Parizeau, this is an opening. Parizeau, the architect of Parti Québécois economic policy, the man who has dreamt of sovereignty for decades, senses that history is finally bending his way. The Federalist general is leaving the battlefield. Parizeau seizes the moment, promising a clear, uncompromising path to independence. Where Bourassa speaks of negotiations, balances, compromises, Parizeau speaks in absolutes. Where Bourassa warns of risks, Parizeau promises liberation. The contrast is sharp, cinematic. The careful accountant of power versus the professor of revolution. When Bourassa leaves the premiership in 1994, he does so quietly, almost clinically. No dramatic tearful speech, no breakdown. He resigns as premier. Daniel Johnson Jr. takes over the Liberal leadership, and soon after, Parizeau leads the Parti Québécois to victory. Parizeau moves into the premier's office that Bourassa once occupied. He sits at the same desk, walks the same corridors, but for the opposite cause. The rivalry has moved from daily debate to something more mythic. Two visions of Quebec, embodied in two men, now passing each other, like ships in the political night. In public, Bourassa seems to fade. He remains a member of the National Assembly for a time, then steps back further, seeking treatment, living more in clinics and hospital rooms than in caucus meetings. But even out of the spotlight, he is watching. When Parizeau announces his intention to hold a referendum on Quebec sovereignty within about a year, Bourassa understands the stakes instantly. The date is not yet set, but the outline is clear. One last decisive vote on the question that has haunted his entire career. The race now is mercilessly double. Parizeau racing toward his referendum, Bourassa racing against his illness. In private conversations, he still argues, still strategizes. Friends and allies visit him and come away struck by the intensity in his eyes. He urges Federalist leaders to take the threat seriously, to understand that the sovereigntists cannot be defeated by fear alone. They must offer hope, a vision of Quebec's future within Canada that feels as real, as emotionally compelling, as the dream offered by Parizeau and his allies. Then, in 1995, the referendum campaign begins. Bourassa is no longer the one giving the speeches, but his fingerprints are everywhere. In the arguments Federalist leaders use, in the warnings they sound, in the numbers they quote. He watches on television as massive rallies are held, flags fill the streets, voices rise in chants of oui and non. Night after night, he sees Parizeau speak with sharp, cutting certainty and remembers all the debates they had, all the cabinet. Meetings where Parizeau argued that Quebec should control its own future, no matter the cost. The tension is not just political, it is personal. For Parizeau, a yes victory would vindicate a lifetime of struggle and bury the Federalist project Bourassa defended. For Bourassa, a no victory would prove that his cautious, incremental approach was not in vain. The rivalry, once contained within question periods and news conferences, now plays out in the hearts of millions of voters. Every poll is a new insult or a new hope. Some nights the yes side leads. Some nights the no side pulls ahead. For a country of nearly 30 million people, the future of its map comes down, astonishingly, to a handful of percentage points. On October 30th, 1995, as the results begin to come in, the numbers are terrifyingly close. Bourassa watches the television as the map of Quebec fills with blue for yes and red for no, riding the same emotional roller coaster as every other citizen, but with the added weight of knowing how many years of his life have been spent trying to avoid this exact moment. At one point in the evening, the yes side is leading. For a few long minutes, it looks as if Bourassa's life's work might evaporate in front of his eyes. Then the tide turns. English-speaking districts, Federalist strongholds, begin to report their results. The no side inches forward, then overtakes the yes. When the final numbers are announced, the entire country exhales in disbelief. 58%. No, 49.42%. Yes. The difference is about 54,000 votes. Fewer people than fit into a large sports stadium. After decades of debate, the fate of a 1.5 million square kilometer province and of a country built over more than a century has been decided by a margin that could fit inside an arena. Parizeau appears before his supporters and delivers a speech that shocks even some of his closest allies, blaming the loss on money and the ethnic vote. The words land like a slap across the country. In homes like Bourassa's, people stare at the screen, stunned. The night that could have been his rival's ultimate triumph becomes instead the end of Parizeau's premiership. Within hours, he announces he will step down. In a twist no strategist could have scripted, the referendum that nearly broke Canada ends up destroying the political career of the sovereigntist premier instead. For Bourassa, watching all this unfold, there is no public victory lap. He does not rush to the cameras to declare himself vindicated. His health simply will not allow it. He remains mostly in the background, a retired statesman, As columnists and historians begin to reassess his role, some call him the reluctant nationalist, others the cold technocrat, who nevertheless understood Quebec's aspirations more deeply than his detractors admitted. The man who once filled stadiums now appears only in occasional interviews, his voice softer, his face marked by illness, but his mind still sharp. In 1996, the disease tightens its grip. The treatments that once bought him time lose their effectiveness. In the end, the man who fought to balance budgets, build dams, and hold a fragile federation together cannot balance the simplest equation of all: there are no more tomorrows to negotiate for. On October 2nd, 1896, Robert Bourassa dies in Montreal at the age of 63. A politician who held power for longer than any other premier in Quebec's modern history, a man who survived crises that would have ended most careers, is gone before reaching what many would call the elder statesman stage of life. The reaction is immediate and emotional. Political opponents praise him. Former sovereigntist rivals acknowledge his determination and intelligence, even as they continue to disagree with his goals. Ordinary citizens leave flowers, sign condolence books, and remember where they were during the October crisis, the James Bay projects, on the constitutional battles. For many, their memories of Quebec's transformation in the late 20th century are inseparable from the figure of Robert Bourassa, the quiet man who always seemed slightly uncomfortable in front of the cameras, yet whose decisions reshaped their daily lives. But his true legacy does not lie only in speeches or agreements, whether they succeeded or failed. It is etched into the landscape, in the immense hydroelectric installations of the James Bay project, turning northern rivers into energy that powers cities. In the institutions of Quebec's modern welfare state, expanded under his watch, in the very idea that Quebec could be both deeply distinct and firmly anchored in Canada. His approach, cautious, incremental, sometimes maddeningly opaque, stands in contrast to the dramatic gestures of his rivals, yet it leaves marks that are harder to erase. Even his failures echo through time. The collapse of Meech Lake and Charlottetown does not just close a chapter, it sets the terms of debate for a generation. Future leaders, federalist and sovereigntist alike, must operate in a landscape shaped by those collapses and by the scars they left. When politicians speak of recognizing Quebec's distinct character, they are still, in a sense, arguing with Robert Bourassa, either trying to finish his unfinished work or trying to move beyond it. There is a final, quieter twist to his story. The man often portrayed as a cold calculator, obsessed with numbers and models, leaves behind a legacy that is, at its core, emotional. The battles he fought were about identity, belonging, fear, and hope. He chose, again and again, the path of negotiation over rupture, of complexity over simplicity. In an age that increasingly rewards slogans and outrage, his life reads like a stubborn, sometimes tragic insistence that compromise is not weakness but survival. And so the image remains: an aging man in a darkened room, watching his rival on a glowing screen, listening to the roar of crowds. He will never address again, feeling the stubborn, painful beat of a heart that will soon stop. The race against time, against illness, against the centrifugal pull of history is over. Yet the questions he wrestled with: who are we? Can such different peoples live together? What price are we willing to pay for unity or for independence? Continue to echo long after his voice has fallen silent. In that echo, Robert Bourassa is still arguing, still negotiating, still holding the line between a province and a country that almost came apart.